Good evening, everybody. My name is Wilt, Town Council member, and I'm joined today by County Legislator from the 27th Legislative District, Sabrina Lamar, and also by Reverend Myra Brown, who is a civil rights activist. And we are going to talk today about redistricting and why this is so important for the Black community in Monroe County. Monroe County has created a new district map that is before the county legislature right now that empowers Black voters by creating 5 majority Black districts, which is fair in terms of the proportions of Black voters within Monroe County. But some want to reject this map, right? So I want to turn to you, Legislator Lamar, and say, how did we get here? This has been a bipartisan process that has gone on for months. So can you describe some of that?
Absolutely, but first I want to take a moment out to thank the both of you for bringing this important topic to our community. This is something that we need to be discussing openly and out in the community and make sure that people understand what's at stake here. And so just a brief synopsis of how we got here. A group of bipartisan legislators agreed to discuss improvements to the redistricting proposal. At the start, legal opinion was sought and obtained from the Board of Elections attorney, and a group agreed to adhere to the Voting Rights Act as a guiding principle. Following several weeks of the meetings, the bipartisan group came to an agreement. A week later, certain Democrats chose to walk away from the agreed upon map for their own partisan political interests. To make matters worse, certain Democrat leaders specifically requested that Black voters be removed from their districts to strengthen their likelihood for future successful primary elections.
So you view a lot of this about personal political gain.
Absolutely.
And benefits.
Absolutely.
So do you think that's influencing people's decisions regarding this map?
Well, I'm just going to be completely transparent. I've been asked by certain legislators to move, either move streets out of their district for fear of a primary, or to add more white voters to a Black district to dilute the Black voting power. And the Voting Rights Act explicitly says that that's illegal.
Wow, wow. That certainly sounds like self-interest.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Individual self-interest versus thinking
Community
about what is
interest.
best for the collective Black community and Black voting electorate.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting.
That's very interesting, because I think a lot of people are trying to make sense of what's going on, right?
Sure.
And they're seeing who's aligned with whom, and they don't understand, right? They don't understand why Black county legislators are not voting necessarily with Black interests for the community.
And that's why I think it's our responsibility to make sure that we are out in our own community telling the story to our folks that makes sense to them.
Right.
And I think that we have a great opportunity to do that right here and right now.
Right, absolutely.
I like that. I think the biggest goal here is to really enfranchise the collective Black community. And I think that has to be the goal over individual self-interest, over individual anxieties,
Yes.
over systemic anxieties. I think that if this is an opportunity to enfranchise the Black electorate collectively, then we should do it.
We absolutely
Because
have to
it's
do it.
fair and it's just,
Yeah.
and it furthers equity and inclusion. So
Absolutely.
that's why I'm excited about it.
And
Absolutely.
It corrects some wrongs that happen,
Right.
especially in the Crescent area as it pertains to redlining and gerrymandering.
Yes.
We have a historical opportunity and an obligation. If we have
Say
the
that
opportunity,
part, an
we have to
obligation.
get it right. We have an obligation to this community to get things right.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
because we talk about the historical wrongs that have been wrought against the Black community, but it's ongoing, right? Part of the reason why certain people prefer maps is because they adhere to those legacy maps where they have won elections, right? But those legacy maps, they have been racially gerrymandered to disfavor black voters, right?
Right.
Absolutely, and it's no secret that this was systematically done, right?
Yeah.
And you know, over the last 2 years, we spent quite a bit of money on this Race Commission report, and the Race Commission reports is almost a guideline on how we can start breaking down systematic racism.
Yeah.
And if we are, if we're true, or if we're acting in good faith of that report, this is an opportunity on how we get things right.
Right, because I know you and I, Myra,
Yeah.
were out in the streets for the past 2 years,
Right.
and that was really important work.
Yeah.
Why would you say this work is equally important, if not more so?
Well, I think this work takes it from the idea to the action, right? Like, think, you know, we marched in the streets together saying Black Lives Matter,
Yeah.
right? We acknowledged collectively as a community that that black voters and black votes were suppressed, right? It's a group that's had their votes suppressed with the redlining and all those really racially discriminatory practices. So we can't acknowledge that history and then be given an opportunity to redress it and to re-enfranchise a community and then decide that we're too anxious to do it, or we're too
Right.
afraid to do it,
Right.
right? Or we have implicit bias that won't let us do it. Like, I think we have to do it,
Yeah.
right? We have to walk our talk, right? And this is an opportunity to do that, right? The black community has at least the 50% or more votes, right? To be able to form these 5 districts. So there's nothing illegal about it, right? In fact, it's a sense they are entitled to it according to
Yeah.
what I understand the Voters' Right Act, right, says that we should
Absolutely.
be doing,
Yeah.
right? So they're entitled to it. So why would you take something away or prevent something from a community that they are legally entitled to have, and that's going to enfranchise a community? It's going to right historical wrongs. It's going to create more equity and more justice in our community. I think we should all be jumping on board
Right.
with this, and I think whatever the obstacles are, whatever the fears are, whatever the anxiety is, I think this is a moment to put that aside and to put it down, right? And really to embrace this opportunity
Yeah.
for the black community who has struggled for equal representation and full representation
Right.
for far too long
Yes.
in our community. And we see that in the ways in which resources are allocated.
Right.
Absolutely.
Especially countywide.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, you see that in terms of, you know, being able to choose their own leaders. You see that in terms of, you know, the black agenda sort of being ignored
Yes.
in these communities that are divested in. I mean, this really could be a game changer
Yeah.
for lifting the floor of equity and inclusion and fair play. So
Right.
I think that this is a wonderful thing that President Lamar and this bipartisan group has done.
Right.
And I would really urge everybody to support
Yes.
this proposal of the five
Yes.
black voting districts.
Everybody who cares about equity and justice, everybody who talks about the John Lewis Voting Rights Act,
Absolutely.
they should be on board with this, right?
Of course they should be on
Right.
board
We
with
should
this.
not be using John Lewis language with Jim Crow actions,
That's
right? We can't continue to do that. Monroe County has 29 districts, and it's almost a shame that we have people pushing back on 5. Now, we have, our county is made up of mostly Caucasian people, so 24 districts is majority Caucasian.
Right.
And this is an opportunity to at least start establishing and acknowledging black people in this community and the contributions that we bring to not just this community, but to society in general.
Yeah, so those 5 black districts, they would be proportional to the black representation countywide, right? The black
Absolutely.
demographic, right?
Absolutely.
So that seems
Absolutely.
fair to me, right?
It is very fair. I just find it interesting, you know, the anxiety around focusing on resisting these 5 black voting districts.
Yeah.
And there's no focus on the other, 24
White districts.
voting districts that are majority white voters, right? And so it says something about where we have become comfortable
Right.
with where the power is held.
Yeah.
And I think, this is a moment in time where we really get to do the right thing, right?
Yeah.
I think we have to address having 24 white majority voting districts at some point, but I think increasing and proposing 5 majority black voting districts is a great start
Absolutely.
to
Yeah,
that conversation
right. We shouldn't-
and that work.
Yeah, we shouldn't have that conversation at the expense of making this advancement for black voters, right?
That's
Shouldn't-
right.
And we shouldn't have any anxiety around that.
Absolutely. And this notion that, and I've heard this, that the progress of black people somehow puts in danger the progress of other groups of people,
Yeah.
whether it's other minorities or the white community. Like, I think that that's a myth, right? It's a myth of scarcity.
Yeah.
Like, there's enough for all of us to
Right.
participate in this political process, but we do have to follow what the Voters' Rights Act calls on us to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In terms of the number and percentage of voters, in terms of whether they are entitled to form their own districts. And today, it sounds like it is the black community that has that right to
Yes,
form
today,
those, to form those 5 black voting districts, and we should not allow that to happen.
Right.
We should begrudge them that.
So I wanna drill down a little bit about, that zero-sum game, because I do hear a lot of minority groups being pitted against one another in this narrative. Let's talk about why the black community has standing under the Voting Rights Act to create these 5 black districts. Can we talk about that for a little?
Absolutely. So Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act requires that minority districts defined by a race or a color or a membership of a single racial minority language group must be drawn when aspects of the Gingell's test are met. In Monroe County, these tests are easily met for black residents, specifically in the Crescent area, which requires Monroe County to create 5 black majority districts. Section 2 of the Voting Act and case law prohibits coalition minority majority districts. Despite bipartisan efforts to create a Hispanic district, the Hispanic population does not meet several prongs of the Gingell's test. While the Voting Rights Act and the Gingell's test prevented the creation of a Hispanic majority district, Hispanic representation is maintained or strengthened across the city of Rochester,
Right.
and black majority districts do not harm other minority communities.
Can we say that again for those in the back of the room?
While the Voting Rights Act and Gingell's test prevented the creation of a Hispanic majority district, Hispanic representation is maintained and strengthened across the city of Rochester. Creating 5 black majority districts does not harm other minority communities.
So what we're really saying is that there is no numbers to support creating a Hispanic majority district. But if there were, we'd be here supporting that, right?
Absolutely.
Because
Right.
that would follow what the Voters' Rights Act calls on us to do.
Right.
But we are saying that the black majority vote, black electoral votes, meet those tests, all 5 of them, I heard you say.
4.
Four,
Yeah.
all 4 of them.
Mhm.
And so that settles
Right.
it kind of
That
for
settles
me.
it, right?
Yeah.
These are the demographics that are on the ground today.
Today seems the operable word.
And have been for quite some time, because the black vote has been suppressed. It has been gerrymandered. So this is really fixing that historical wrong.
Absolutely, and if I could just take a moment to expound a bit on the Gingell's test. So the Gingell's test is a case law from 1986, Thornburg versus Gingell's, and the Gingell's test has to meet 5 requirements. The first one says, is the minority group large and geographically compact enough to constitute a majority of the voting age population? And in Rochester, the crescent is contiguous or continuous and compact enough, and the areas can be easily divided into 5 black majority districts. And so that's the first test of Giggles. And if you pass that first test, then you move on to the second one.
Right.
And the second one says the minority group must be politically cohesive. Well, once again, in Rochester, historical election data suggests that cohesive voting patterns amongst Rochester black voters is there.
Yeah. So let me go over these first 2. The black population in the city is dense enough. We know that blacks comprise 42% of the voting population in the city.
Absolutely.
Correct? And then also, the black vote is concentrated, it's dense within particularly the Crescent area. So that's why those first 2 prongs are met. So let's continue.
Absolutely. And the second prong also, black votes. It shows that black folks vote together.
That's right. And
they vote in blocks.
Black voters vote as a group.
Absolutely.
Is that true when black voters are combined with another minority group, for instance? Do they vote with that minority group necessarily?
They don't.
So we can't combine minority groups for this test, because black voters do not vote the same as other minority groups.
And it's illegal.
Yes.
And the law explicitly says that that adding white voters to black voters is dilution, and that's what cracking is. But we'll get into cracking and packing in a little while.
Okay. All right. So proceed.
Okay, so
Legislator Lamar.
After the second test is met, then the third one says the white majority must vote sufficiently as a bloc to enable it to defeat the minority's preferred candidate. And in Rochester, historical correlation between a voter and a candidate is race. Historical elections data supports this. And there are examples that we can look at that supports that.
Okay.
And so then once those 3 are met, then we look at the totality of the circumstances. That's the history of the discrimination in that area, racially polarized voting trends, discriminatory voting practices, historically disenfranchisement, and other hindrances of enfranchisement. And in Rochester, the Crescent area has been historically undervalued, experiencing redlining, disinvestment, discriminatory voting practices, lack of government responsiveness, and more. The recent Race Commission report, which I mentioned earlier, further identified these and detailed historical discrimination areas.
Right. And we're well aware of this. We're well aware of this. There have been plenty, there's a Race Commission report, there have been plenty of other reports that have been done regarding the historical disenfranchisement, devaluation of the Crescent community. And so that community does share a historical connection, and that creates neighborhood, that creates community. So I think we're all aware of this, and so it's not unprecedented to talk about the Crescent and the special historical connection that communities within the Crescent share.
Yeah.
So
I appreciate you explaining the Giggles test because it seems very clear as I listen to you sort of break that down, that clearly the black community and black voting electorate fits those four tests and moves through those. So thank you for that.
yeah, thank you for sharing that.
No problem.
So the other thing that I heard a lot of was must. Like, if we have the ability to draw these districts, then we must.
Absolutely.
So this, again, is following the letter of the law,
Absolutely.
correct?
Absolutely.
And there's a mandate in there too,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. So if perchance our county executive should veto this map, that has those 5 black districts that we can clearly draw, would there be legal standing to sue the county?
I believe so.
Okay.
I mean, of course, the results are at the discretion of the judge, but I think that there's a legal leg to stand on if this should be vetoed. And I don't think that the county executive, I mean, I'm sure he can do whatever he wants to do,
Right.
but I don't think that he can veto something just because I don't like it. Like,
Right.
that can't be an answer to the community about why we are getting rid of this. There needs to be some legal standing behind why it's being vetoed. Now, there's been some discussion about the city having 6 districts, but I want you to know that there is a big difference between 6 city districts and 5 black majority districts. To create 6 districts, it would be at the expense of black voters,
Right,
which is illegal.
yes, yes.
So it's interesting that there's at least some voices that would want to go to the illegal piece
Right,
at the expense of black voters, but not entitle black voters what.
to determine their own destiny, really.
Yeah, well, and what they're entitled to
Yes.
legally, right,
Yes.
and historically.
Yes,
So I find that very interesting. I think it would be a huge tragedy if the county executive vetoed this.
absolutely.
And I think it would be, I would hope that the black community, and those in our community, who are fair-minded and believe in justice, would rise up and hold them accountable for that, because it would just be wrong. It would just be wrong for the county executive, given what we know about this proposal and this map and how it redresses historical wrongs and how it re-enfranchises a community. I think the only response here from the county executive would be to approve these 5 black majority voting districts. That's certainly what I would do.
Agreed.
And if he does decide to veto this, then we need to be having conversations with the legislators in our own districts.
Yes.
Because we need 20 votes to override the county exec's veto. We have 16.
Yes.
So that would mean that.
Which means it's bipartisan, right? Because there are only, how many Republican county legislators? 14, right?
Yes.
So,
Mhm.
so it is by default a bipartisan coalition that
Absolutely.
supports this 5 majority black district map.
Absolutely.
Okay, so, okay,
And
so
just,
what
and
do
just
we
to be
do?
clear, this
Yeah.
map, when this map was put together, there were 4 Democrats and
At the table.
and 1 Republican at the table.
Wow. So this map was drawn in a coalition of majority Democrats.
Absolutely.
Wow, wow.
And then somehow they just did an about face.
Surprised me
It sounds
too. And I think we all found out at the same time that it was a problem.
Yeah, yeah.
I've never seen another map. I've never seen any proposals on where lines, if there was an issue, if there were community members that said to other legislators, like, this is a problem. I've never seen a draft of what that could look like.
Yeah, because I do hear support for another map. And this map does not seem to be before the public right now.
Never seen it.
But we do have a public hearing coming up, right, where people can become engaged and actually speak out in favor of the 5 majority black district map. So when is that? Could you give us the details on that?
That meeting, the public hearing for redistricting is on Wednesday, September 28th at 5 p.m. at the Monroe County Office Building. And that's at 39 West Main Street in Chambers on the 4th floor.
Great.
So I would really urge people to sign up to speak at that. I think it's really important for us as a community, particularly for the black community. As a pastor, I would say to other pastors, please talk with your congregations and make sure that they understand what's at stake here for re-enfranchisement of the black electoral vote here and what that could really do for our community. I think it's really a critical moment in history to make sure that we get as many people out to that public hearing to speak in favor of this map being drawn.
Yeah, this
And-
represents a historic opportunity. And every justice and equity-minded individual in the county should be pounding the podium
Absolutely.
at this public hearing.
Absolutely, and if you would like to sign up to speak, you can call 585-753-1950. Again, that's 585-753-1950.
Great. So everybody should be calling to sign up with the county, the clerk of the county legislature, to sign up to speak. You should be calling your individual legislators to support this map if they stand for equity and justice.
And Robin, if you will, I think that there is a big misconception about what cracking and packing is.
Yeah.
And I think that we should take an opportunity to explain that
Let's
to the
clarify that.
public. Because, you know, when you hear packing, I think about putting my clothes in a suitcase.
Right.
But when packing is talked about in the redistricting sense, it's a little different.
Yeah, and so just to be clear, packing and cracking are terms that we use to identify certain racially based gerrymandering practices, right?
Right.
Okay, all right, so let's take each one from the top. Packing. What does packing look like? What is packing in terms of racial gerrymandering? Let's talk about this.
So packing is when members of a minority group create too few districts of minority voters. And I'll give you an example. District 27, that's actually the district that I represent, and it's one of the largest black voting blocks in the county. Well, although 27 is great, what happened 10 years ago is they put all of the black voters in that one little district, that one district, which means 27 is a very powerful district, but you only have power or you only have leadership in 27. You don't have leadership across the street over in 28
Right.
or across the street over in 25. You put them in one box, which means that they have the ability to elect one person.
So while the votes are concentrated within LD 27, they're diluted throughout the entire county.
Absolutely.
That's
because
really
they packed them
yeah.
all into
Right.
one district.
Mhm.
And what we're doing essentially with this 5-district map is unpacking districts like 27.
So ultimately, when you're packing, it isn't the minority group that wins, right? In
Right.
terms of political representation and voter representation, right? It maintains sort of the white majority.
Absolutely, and we see this,
in
right?
voting
Because
power.
we have legislators that are supporting maps or that have 2 majority black districts. And so there must be packing of the black vote.
Absolutely. That's the only way you can get
In
that.
order to squeeze all black voters into just 2 majority districts.
Absolutely.
Okay, all right. So let's go on to the next term,
The next term is cracking.
okay?
And cracking is really the opposite. And what cracking does, it's when members of a minority group are split into too many districts that they cannot form a majority.
Okay, all right, and again, so both packing and cracking are ways to dilute the black vote.
Absolutely. Black representation. Absolutely.
Right, okay, and that has been done historically
Yes.
in our community.
Right. Which is why we currently have fewer than 5 black districts now.
Right.
So would we say that right now, that what we're working with now is it has some packing and cracking in it?
Yeah.
And that's what we're moving away from, isn't
Right.
it?
Absolutely. We're strengthening these
Yeah.
districts by making sure that they are at 50% with a deviation of 5% up or down. We're making sure that we are spreading the population around enough so they can be able to select their own representation, and then they can essentially, that representation can, have an effect within the county or within the city or whatever.
Determine the priorities
Absolutely, whatever
of
district they're
the
in.
community, right?
Absolutely.
Right, okay.
Well, that's a needed thing.
Yeah,
I hear that a lot.
I feel like this is so crucial to understanding this, that we only use the term cracking and packing when we are disempowering voters. We don't use that term when we are empowering voters, like the 5 black majority district map
Absolutely.
does. That empowers black voters, right?
Yes.
So that term should never, those terms should never be applied to the Crescent map.
Absolutely, and at a time when the Voting Rights Act is under siege, right?
Yeah.
We need to make sure, especially in the Democratic Party, that we support and that we are a part of, we need to make sure that we are protecting the rights of
Right.
black voters.
Yeah.
And we can't love black votes and not black leadership. We
Right.
cannot continue to go on like that. And so it is, it's in the best interest of especially the legislators that represent the city and the county executive to support this map.
Yeah, so if you believe that black lives matter, then you should believe that black votes matter, black
Absolutely.
voters matter,
That's
and
right.
black leadership matters.
That's right.
Absolutely.
And this map serves to empower black voters.
And when you empower black voters, you really empower every other minority voter, right? Like,
Right.
you can't disempower the black
Right.
vote and then say that we're somehow serving minority groups.
Right.
Because we can never do that,
Absolutely.
right? In fact, we have black voters to thank for the
Yeah.
Voters' Right Act itself.
Yes.
Right? They gave us that gift, our world, that gift to protect and to make sure that we have a right to vote regardless of race. And so I think we have a responsibility here
Yeah.
to vote for this amazing proposal.
Yeah.
I'm just so very grateful for our legislators who got in that room,
Yeah.
who came up with this map.
Absolutely.
You know, it's unfortunate that people walked away and then had another thought about themselves.
Right.
But I think the first thought was right. I think the first thought in creating this
Absolutely.
map was
Right.
about the community.
Yeah.
I need people to stay with that first thought,
Right.
which was about the community at large and
Yeah.
how this 5 black majority voting districts is going to help the larger black community.
Yeah.
And not revert and recoil to thinking, oh, but wait, what does that mean
Are
for
my
me as
interests
an
right?
individual?
Yeah.
What does that mean for who might run against me? I
Yeah.
think that's the wrong way to think about
Right,
this.
right, right.
So I would urge
Yeah.
the legislatures to return to their first thought as they
Yeah.
were crafting this map.
Right, because ultimately, this is the law, right? This is the only voting rights compliant legal map that is being considered, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
There isn't another one.
Well, I want to thank you both for joining me in conversation about this because I think there's been a lot of disinformation, a lot of obfuscation, a lot of attempts to talk about, whataboutism, what about this, what about that, where I think in this conversation we've really gotten to the heart of the issue, which is the law and the empowerment of the black community, right?
Absolutely.
I think so, absolutely, I think so. And, you know, I think this is a great time,
Yeah,
right, to be active and to be involved in
Yeah.
justice work, right, in equity work and in inclusion work.
yeah,
And I think that we have to be critical thinkers
yeah,
around, you know, where are we being called to? And I think that we have to kind of possess ourselves when anti-black anxiety takes
Yes.
us over, when fear takes us over.
Mhm.
And we live in a country where we have struggled, right, around systemic racism, we've struggled around systems of white supremacy, we've struggled around anti-blackness, right,
Yeah.
where this anxiety, any mention of the word black,
right,
often will draw some opposition
Mhm.
just
Yes.
because the word black is in it.
right,
And that's part of the healing that we need to have in our city, and it's part of the healing we need to have in our world. And I think supporting these 5 black voting districts is an opportunity to begin that work.
thank you. Thank you both.
And I echo with what Reverend Myra said. We must protect communities of interest.
Yes,
And communities of interest are based on race, economic status, neighborhoods, school districts. We must preserve those communities.
right? And we do that by creating opportunity.
Absolutely.
And drawing these districts creates that opportunity
Absolutely,
for self-determination. So,
absolutely. It's transformative work.
absolutely.
Transformative work.
That's why I'm so excited about this.
I am too.
Yeah. So again, thank you for joining me this evening. Again, what is that number to call to sign up to speak?
585-753-1950.
And that is on Wednesday, September 28th at 5 p.m. at the Monroe County Office Building, 39 West Main Street. We will see you there.
Thank you.
Take care.